Lucas Crawford had always wanted to work at sea. He dreamed of the freedom of open waters and endless horizons. When he got a job as a crew member on the luxury cruise ship Oceanic Horizon, it seemed like a dream come true. But behind the shiny exterior of the ship, Lucas found a world of secrets and shadows that turned his dream into a nightmare. The ship was huge, like a floating city with restaurants, theaters, pools, and more. Guests laughed, danced, and drank cocktails under fake stars on the upper decks. Below, though, was where the real work happened. A maze of narrow hallways and hidden rooms meant to keep the ship's operations out of sight. Lucas worked in guest services, which let him talk to passengers and hear their stories. It also gave him access to restricted areas and private conversations between senior crew members. He thought nothing of the occasional argument or sharp command, until one night when he overheard a chilling conversation in the staff-only cafeteria. "Passenger overboard," one voice said calmly. "We're staying on course. We can't afford delays this close to port." Lucas froze. Someone had fallen overboard, and they weren't stopping to search? His heart raced as he stared into his cup of coffee, pretending not to listen. That night, Lucas lay awake in his cramped cabin, replaying the words in his mind. The ship's schedule was tight, with every stop planned down to the minute. But could they really put the schedule above a person's life? He decided to find out more, even if it meant risking his job. The next day, Lucas quietly approached a fellow crew member, Sophia, who worked in security. She was tough, but had always been kind to him. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" Lucas said, keeping his voice low. She raised an eyebrow. "Sure, but make it quick. I'm on shift in 5. Last night, I overheard something about a passenger going overboard and not stopping. Do you know anything about that?" Sophia's face darkened, and she looked around to make sure no one was nearby. "Lucas, you need to let this go. It's complicated." "Complicated? Someone could be dead." "It's not what you think," Sophia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There's more to this than you realize. If you dig too deep, you'll get yourself in trouble." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Sophia shook her head. "I've already said too much. Just be careful." As Sophia walked away, Lucas felt more determined than ever. He wasn't about to let this go. He needed answers, no matter what. His chance came sooner than he expected. That evening, while delivering room service to a VIP guest, Lucas took a wrong turn down an unfamiliar hallway. The air felt colder, the lights dimmer. He passed a heavy steel door marked "Restricted Access." Curiosity tugged at him, and he hesitated. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, Lucas tried the handle. It was locked, but as he lingered, he heard muffled voices inside. Pressing his ear to the door, he caught bits of a conversation. "Breaking protocol. They'll send him to the brig until we dock. Do you think he'll talk?" "Doesn't matter. He won't get the chance." Lucas's stomach churned. The ship had a brig? He hadn't heard about that during training. Suddenly, footsteps approached. Heart pounding, he hurried away, slipping back into the main corridor before anyone could see him. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was dark and terrifying. The ship wasn't just a floating resort. It was a place where secrets were buried and lives didn't seem to matter. Determined to learn more, Lucas started exploring the ship during his free time. In the lower decks, he found storage rooms filled with strange equipment, machines that buzzed and hummed with an eerie glow. One night, he discovered a hidden lab. Inside were rows of monitors showing surveillance footage of the entire ship, including areas passengers were never meant to see. But what caught his attention was a series of files labeled Project Horizon. Lucas opened one of the files, his hands shaking. What he read made his blood run cold. The documents described experiments done on unwilling passengers and crew, psychological tests, drug trials, and worse. The ship wasn't just a luxury liner. It was a floating lab. As Lucas read, he realized the overboard incidents weren't accidents. They were cover-ups. Passengers who resisted or asked too many questions were disposed of, their deaths explained as tragic accidents. And the holding cells? They were for people who posed a threat to the ship's hidden mission. But then Lucas stumbled across something even darker. One file referenced special cargo, with vague notes about transfers and handling protocols. He dug deeper, finding manifests that didn't match any of the ship's official records. Finally, a photo appeared on the screen, a grainy image of children, frightened and huddled together in a dimly lit room. Lucas felt his chest tighten. The ship was smuggling children. The manifest detailed routes, drop-off points, and names of people involved. The children were being trafficked under the guise of cruise passengers or as part of the crew. Lucas felt sick to his stomach as the realization hit him. He was part of a system that exploited innocent lives. Lucas knew he had to do something, but with every step he took, the walls seemed to close in tighter. The ship was a trap, and its secrets were guarded by people willing to do anything to protect them. Lucas began secretly documenting everything he saw. He needed proof if he wanted to expose the horrors happening aboard the Oceanic Horizon. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. His schedule started changing without explanation. Crew members gave him strange looks. His cabin was searched while he was away. The captain of the ship, Captain Harland, was a mysterious figure. Lucas rarely saw him outside formal events, and even then, the man seemed cold and distant. Rumors among the crew hinted at shady dealings, but no one dared to talk openly. Lucas decided that if anyone had the answers he needed, it was Harland. One night, Lucas followed the captain to a private meeting in the ship's conference room. Hiding in the shadows, he overheard Harland speaking with a group of men in suits. Their conversation confirmed Lucas's worst fears. Sophia appeared at his cabin door, her face pale and tense. "I know what you're doing," she said, "and I want to help." "Why?" Lucas asked, suspicious. "Because I can't watch this happen anymore," Sophia said. "I've seen too much." Together, they made a plan to smuggle Lucas's evidence off the ship. Sophia had access to the secure communications room and promised to send the files to a trusted contact once they reached the next port. But their plan was risky, and failure would be costly. On the night of the operation, Lucas and Sophia moved carefully through the ship, avoiding guards and cameras. They reached the communications room, but just as Sophia began uploading the files, an alarm blared throughout the ship. "They know," Sophia whispered, her face pale. "We have to move." Lucas grabbed the flash drive with the remaining evidence, and they ran. Guards were closing in, and soon they were cornered in a storage area. "There's no way out," Sophia said, her voice shaking. Lucas looked around, desperate. Then he saw it, a maintenance hatch leading to the ventilation system. "This way," he said, pulling Sophia toward it. They crawled through narrow tunnels, the sound of footsteps behind them. Finally, they emerged in the engine room, where the roar of machines covered their escape. "We can't keep running," Sophia said, her voice full of fear. "They'll find us?" Lucas nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we fight?" Using tools in the engine room, they prepared for a final stand. When the guards burst in, Lucas and Sophia fought with everything they had. The struggle was chaotic, but in the end, they were overpowered and captured. Lucas woke up in a small, windowless cell. His head ached and his body was sore. Across from him, Sophia sat slumped against the wall, her face bruised but defiant. "We tried," she said softly. Lucas nodded, feeling hopeless. But then he noticed something, a small, hidden camera in the corner of the cell. The ship's intercom crackled to life as Lucas sat in the dim cell. Lucas Crawford opened his eyes slowly, the world around him spinning. His head hurt, and it felt like the room was closing in on him. He tried to move, but his arms and legs were weak, like he'd been drugged. Blinking hard, he realized he was lying on a cold metal table in a room he didn't recognize. Bright lights overhead made it hard to see, but he could hear voices. Slowly, he turned his head to the side. Sophia was strapped to a chair nearby, her face pale but her eyes burning with anger. She looked at him, her lips moving, but the words were muffled, like they were coming from far away. "Lucas, stay awake," she said, her voice breaking through the fog in his mind. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Instead, he nodded weakly. In front of them stood Captain Harland, the man Lucas had come to hate more than anyone. Harland's uniform was perfectly pressed, his expression calm, almost smug. Behind him, Strange machines hummed and blinked, their purpose a mystery. "Good, you're awake," Harlan said, his voice smooth like oil. "You've been causing a lot of trouble, Lucas. But I must admit, you've also been interesting." Lucas glared at him, his strength slowly returning. "You're a monster," he croaked. "This ship, what you're doing, it's wrong." Harlan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Always so dramatic. You see things in black and white, but the world isn't that simple. What we're doing here is important." "Important?" Sophia spat, her voice sharp. "You're hurting people. You're ruining lives." Harlan's expression darkened, and he leaned closer to her. "Sacrifices are necessary for progress, Ms. Rivera. That's a truth you'll have to accept." Lucas's fists clenched, but the straps holding him down stopped him from moving. "You're not helping anyone," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "You're just using people for your experiments. And the kids. How can you live with yourself?" For the first time, Harlan's smug smile faltered, but only for a moment. "You don't understand what's at stake. The research we're conducting will change the world. Medicine, technology, human potential. We're pushing boundaries that no one else dares to touch." "At what cost?" Lucas shouted, his anger giving him strength. "People are dying. Those kids. They're not your guinea pigs." Harlan's face hardened. "Enough. I don't expect you to understand, but I won't let you stand in our way." He nodded to the guards, and one of them stepped forward, holding a syringe filled with a clear liquid. Lucas's heart raced as he struggled against the straps. "No! Stop!" But the guard was too fast. The needle jabbed into Lucas's arm, and a cold sensation spread through his body. He fought to stay awake, to keep his eyes open, but the drug was too strong. "Lucas!" Sophia shouted, her voice filled with panic. As the world around him started to fade, Lucas made one final promise to himself. "This isn't over. I'll get out of here. I'll stop them, no matter what it takes." When Lucas woke up, he was back in the small cell, his head pounding. Across from him, Sophia sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her face was bruised, but her eyes were sharp and determined. "They're not going to break us," she said, her voice low but steady. Lucas nodded, though every part of him ached. "We'll find a way. We have to." From the tiny camera in the corner of the cell, Harlan's voice came through the intercom, calm and mocking. "Rest up, Lucas. You'll need your strength for what's coming." Lucas looked at Sophia and whispered, "We're not done yet." Lucas and Sophia sat in the cramped, dimly lit cell, their minds racing. They had risked everything, and now they were trapped. Lucas stared at the loose metal plate in the corner of the cell, its edges rusted and jagged. "That plate might be our way out," he whispered, his voice trembling. Sophia crouched beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She nodded. "We'll wait for the next shift change." The guards get lazy around then. The hours dragged by, the silence broken only by faint footsteps and the low hum of the ship's systems. When the moment finally came, they pried the plate loose, revealing a narrow, filthy tunnel filled with wires and pipes. The stench of rotting food and chemicals wafted up, making Sophia gag. "It's disgusting," she muttered. "It's our only chance," Lucas said, steeling himself. They squeezed into the tunnel, crawling on their hands and knees. The walls pressed against them, and every movement felt like a struggle. The air grew colder as they went deeper into the ship. Halfway through the tunnel, they heard a muffled scream, a sound so raw and terrified it made Lucas stop in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice shaking. Sophia nodded, her face pale. "We can't stop. Keep moving." But the screams didn't stop. They grew louder, more desperate. Lucas's stomach churned as they neared a vent. He pressed his face to the slats and froze. Below them was a room bathed in harsh, white light. A man was strapped to a metal table, his body convulsing as electricity surged through him. Monitors beeped, and a figure in a lab coat stood nearby, jotting notes on a clipboard. "Subject 37 isn't responding," the person said coldly. "Increase the power." The man on the table let out a gut-wrenching scream, his body arching violently. Lucas felt his stomach turn, while rising in his throat. "We have to do something," he whispered. Sophia grabbed his arm. "We can't. If we're caught, it's over." Tears filled Lucas's eyes as he tore himself away from the vent, the man's screams echoing in his mind. They emerged in the engine room, a massive space filled with roaring machinery. The air was thick with heat and the smell of oil. Sophia pointed to a computer terminal in the corner. "We can send the evidence from there," she said. While Sophia worked at the terminal, Lucas explored the area. He stumbled across a stack of crates marked with strange symbols. Curious, he pried one open. Inside were rows of vials filled with a glowing, green liquid. Beside them were blood-stained straps and surgical tools. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Then he heard it again, a faint, pitiful sound. A child crying. Lucas followed the sound to a small, locked door. He forced it open and froze. Inside were a group of children, huddled together on the floor. Their faces were pale and hollow, their eyes filled with fear. Their hands were bound with plastic ties, and bruises covered their arms. "Help us," one of them whispered. Lucas's chest tightened. "Sophia," he called. She ran over and gasped. "Oh my God! We have to get them out," Lucas said, his voice shaking. "We can't," Sophia replied, tears in her eyes. "If we stop now, everything we've done will be for nothing. We'll come back for them, I promise." Lucas knelt beside the children, his heart breaking. "Stay strong," he said softly. "I swear, we'll save you." Back at the terminal, Sophia finished uploading the files. The moment she hit send, alarms blared. Red lights flashed, and a voice over the intercom said, "Emergency lockdown initiated. All crew to their stations." "They know," Sophia said, panic in her voice. "We need a distraction," Lucas said. He spotted a valve labeled Emergency Flood System and turned it without hesitation. Water began pouring into the lower decks, spreading chaos. Passengers screamed, and crew members yelled orders as they scrambled to evacuate. But their victory was short-lived. A group of guards stormed into the engine room, their weapons raised. "Run!" Sophia shouted. They darted into a maintenance corridor, the sound of boots pounding behind them. The chase led them to the cargo hold, where water was already rising. Suddenly, Captain Harland appeared, blocking their path. He held a gun, his face calm but deadly. "It's over," he said, his voice cold. Lucas stepped forward, his fist clenched. "You're done, Harland. The evidence is out. People will know what you've done." Harland smirked. "This ship might sink, but my work won't stop. You're just an inconvenience." Before Harland could pull the trigger, Sophia lunged at him. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the confined space. Lucas joined the fight, grappling with Harland as water surged around them. The struggle ended when Lucas slammed Harland's head into a crate, knocking him unconscious. They climbed into a lifeboat just as the Coast Guard arrived. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the chaos. The children were rescued, and Harland was arrested along with his crew. Lucas and Sophia watched as the oceanic horizon began to sink, its dark secrets swallowed by the sea. As they sat on the deck of a Coast Guard ship, Sophia turned to Lucas. "We stopped them?" Lucas nodded, but his face was grim. "This was just one ship. There are more out there doing the same thing." Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll fight them too, together." As the sun rose over the horizon, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. The fight wasn't over, but they had won this battle. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to breathe. The weeks that followed their escape were a whirlwind of meetings, police interviews, and constant fear. The authorities had begun their investigation, and the world was learning the truth about the oceanic horizon. The media reported on the horrific experiments and the children being smuggled across the seas. Harland and his crew were arrested, but the damage was already done. However, even as the truth spread, something felt wrong to Lucas. There were whispers that this wasn't just one ship. Investigations uncovered more dark secrets, more ships, more people involved in the trafficking and experiments. The horror was far bigger than they had ever imagined. Lucas and Sophia joined forces with other survivors who had been fighting against this evil for years. They formed a small group to help expose more of these operations and bring down the people behind them. But it wasn't easy. Every time they uncovered something new, the threat of danger grew stronger. One night, while going through old records and files they had collected, Lucas found something that sent a chill down his spine. A message on his phone read, "It's not over. They're coming for you." The words were simple, but they shook him to his core. He looked at Sophia, who was working quietly at the table beside him. Her face was pale, and her eyes had dark circles from the constant stress. "What is it?" she asked, noticing his change in expression. "It's a warning," Lucas replied, his voice low and filled with dread. "They know we're still here, and they're coming for us." Sophia's face paled even more. "We have to get out of here. They won't stop." But Lucas wasn't so sure. Something deep inside him told him that running wouldn't solve anything. He looked at the evidence they had gathered, the children's faces, the medical files, the manifests. It was all proof of what had been happening, and it was up to them to make sure the truth was exposed. But the more they fought, the more dangerous things became. Lucas and Sophia began receiving strange phone calls in the middle of the night. Someone was always watching them. Strange people showed up outside their safe house, their faces hidden in the shadows. It was like the shadows themselves were closing in, making it harder to trust anyone. Then one night, things got worse. They had just finished reviewing a new set of documents when the lights flickered. The power went out. Suddenly, the door to their safe house was kicked open. Figures in dark clothing rushed inside, their faces hidden beneath masks. The sound of their boots echoed through the room as they surrounded Lucas and Sophia. "You thought you could stop us?" one of them sneered. "This is bigger than you. This will never end." Lucas felt his heart race, but he refused to back down. He and Sophia had come too far. They wouldn't let these monsters win. In the chaos, Lucas managed to grab a chair and break a window. He and Sophia ran out into the night, their feet pounding on the pavement as they escaped into the dark streets. They had no plan, no place to go, only their desire to stop the nightmare that was still out there. As they fled into the unknown, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the true horror was still waiting for them. The operation was too vast, too powerful to be stopped easily. And now, they were in the crosshairs. The fight for the truth was only getting darker. The world hadn't seen the end of the oceanic horizon. It was just the beginning.